My husband and I attend Ascension Lutheran Church in Fort Wayne, Indiana, so it is really great to be among fellow believers. A lot of times when I share the information I'm going to share with you, it's with folks that are not of my denomination, and that doesn't matter other than I just really feel at home here. So thank you so much for attending, and I'll see what I can do to break this before we're done. For those of you who are listening to the recording, we had a bit of technological difficulty, so I think we're on track now. I've been in pro-life advocacy since the mid 1980s, probably around 1985, and there are probably some of you in this room that were not born then. But no, well, I can see some others that probably weren't born as well. So I knew abortion was going on, but I didn't pay much attention to it. So a dear friend of mine shared with me over lunch that she had had an abortion, and would I still be your friend? And I said, well, yeah, of course. So the Lord grabbed my heart for the issue through the broken heart of my friend, who believed that for a price, she believed the lie that was sold to her by the abortion industry, that for a price, the abortionist would give her a do-over. It would be as if it never happened. So after the abortion, of course, what she realized, as many women do, is that it didn't give her a do-over. It just made her the mother of a dead baby. This was before the pregnancy resource centers that many of you may be familiar with, and the healing ministries, the post-abortion ministries like Silent No More and Deeper Still, and some of those very effective ministries now that are reaching out to over 60 million mothers. It's something less than that because some of them have had multiple abortions, but still, they're reaching out to these women, and that number is growing every day, that are brokenhearted and have a broken spirit and think that what they did is the unforgivable sin, which it is not. I haven't had an abortion. At one point in my life, I probably would have if I would have thought I needed one. But this abortion decision in the moment of a crisis is not the unforgivable sin that so many women believe. And oftentimes I've heard them say to me, well, we don't hear about abortion in the church, so it must be the unforgivable sin, because other sins are discussed, and I can come to a place, the people that need to repent can come to the foot of the cross and repent and get healing. But probably not for me, because this is so bad that I have paid for an abortionist to take the life of my baby. So I want to say up front that almost every group that I share information with, there's somebody that has been touched by an abortion decision. If they haven't had an abortion themselves, maybe they encourage their daughter to get an abortion, or their sister, or someone in their family or their friends. I even talked to a heartbroken woman who felt guilty because she had driven her friend to the abortion facility, and she felt guilty for aiding the woman in making this awful decision. So there are wounded people all around us, and anything I say today is not intended to heap on to any pain that is previous. Just know that there is healing at the foot of the cross of the Lord Jesus Christ for an abortion decision, just like there's healing at the foot of the cross for every sin I've committed, no matter how small or great. And I know you've heard the gospel many times, but we need to make certain that when we have the opportunity, we don't shake our fingers in the faces of anyone and quote scripture and say, you're going to hell because of what you did. And believe me, there are people that stand in front of abortion facilities attempting to reach women before they go in at the very last minute. And they scream that at them. You're going to hell. Well, the abortion providers, the staff, just tell the women ahead of time, just push through that and come in here and we'll take care of you, because we're the kind ones. Those people out there are the crazies, and they mean you harm. So anyway, I could go off on this tangent for a long time, but I just want to encourage you. I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm just here to point them to the cross of Jesus, and I would encourage you to think of, I know you do, but think about that when the abortion discussion comes up. There is no more effective witness for the unborn than women who've had abortions and have been healed from it. But until that happens, there's no more strident and ugly voice for abortion than women who've had an abortion and have not worked through the aftermath of that. So anyway, enough said about that. Okay, this, can everybody see that? Here, I'll do this. Oh look, made just for me. This is the abortion facility that operated next to my office for years. So my office was over here on this side of the building. A very kind and savvy pro-life businessman bought this building, and he said, I want your office to be right next door. So on Thursday mornings, which was procedure day, when abortions were being done in that building, I would sit at my desk like this and look out the window, and about as far as those windows are, I could see the women going into the abortion facility and coming out 2 or 3 hours later, stumbling down the steps with one arm over the friend that brought them and the other arm over one of the abortion facility workers. And she had to go down the steps, and they would sometimes literally drag her across the parking lot to the back seat of the car, open the door, and she would collapse in the back. I saw this Thursday after Thursday after Thursday. And it occurred to me finally, I wonder why my church has to have a wheelchair ramp. The sex club down the street has to have a wheelchair ramp. Not only that, they had to put in an elevator so that their clients, if they were wheelchair bound, could access the entertainment on the second floor. Why does everybody else have to have a wheelchair ramp except the abortionist? And I didn't know the answer to that. So I started down the path of finding out who is responsible for making businesses have wheelchair ramps. And I found out it was the Americans with Disabilities division of the government under, I think it was HHS, Health and Human Services. Well, this will tell you how long I've been working at this. This was under the Obama administration, and Kathleen Sebelius, I don't know if that name is familiar to you. She used to be the governor of Kansas, and George Tiller was a late-term abortionist in Kansas. And they were like this. So she was in charge of the Department of Health and Human Services, and under her authority was the division that handled the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I found out how to write a complaint if you notice something like this that's a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I found out who that was, and because I didn't know any better, I filed a complaint. And I submitted it according to their regulations, and they acknowledged that they received it like they have to, and then crickets. So I started becoming their best friend because they heard from me every week. What's the status of this complaint? Are you going to investigate? Went on and on and on. So finally they sent me a letter, I still have it, that says, please don't consider what is reported in this letter to be a determination of innocence or guilt. We just don't have time to look into it.
Wow.
So, okay, I thought, I wonder what else is going on over there that might be a violation. Now, I had already been working with the legislators in Indiana. I'm from Fort Wayne. I think I may have said that. But anyway, and working to get pro-life legislation passed. And even before that, I helped as best I could to get them elected. If they, if they make the public statement and I know them and they tell me that they're pro-life, I want to work to get them elected. So we did all that. But what we found out is that the people who are in a position of authority to enforce those laws are not doing their job. Either they're far enough down the food chain in the Indiana State Department of Health that they didn't change with the next administration and they're just there, rubber stamping and looking the other way and all of that. Or there is something more nefarious going on. I may have needed it. Okay, so here is, I wish you could see this. This is Ulrich Klopfer. He was the abortionist who operated next door to my office for all those years that I was there. I really wish you could, afterwards, if you want to see him, I mean, he was something else. So anyway, what we learned through public information requests and whatnot is that there were thousands of violations that abortionist Klopfer had committed. We filed over 2,000 complaints with the Medical Licensing Board and the Indiana State Department of Health and every other authority that had any kind of enforcement power. So finally, and we did this through requesting, I wish I'd have brought one with me, but a termination of pregnancy report. Now, by law in Indiana and many other states, the abortionist is required to complete a termination of pregnancy report. This has no identifying information, but it tells things like the place the abortion was performed, the date, the age of the young girl, or of the woman, which is extremely important because of sexual abuse. And it's a 8.5 by 11 sheet with a lot of information. So we requested the termination of pregnancy reports that abortionist Klopfer had completed. Well, we also found out when we started looking into this, and we kind of knew it, but hadn't really connected the dots. Ulrich Klopfer lived in Crete, Illinois. And I don't know, Illinois is next to Indiana, and Crete is kind of a rural area south of Chicago, around in that area. So his work week is he would start out on Monday and he would go to South Bend, Indiana, and then Gary, Indiana, and then Fort Wayne, and then back to South Bend, and then he'd go to Crete, Illinois, which is where his home was. So we partnered with the Right to Life organizations in South Bend and Gary, too. So we started requesting all these termination of pregnancy reports, and at the time they gave them to us actual pieces of paper. So a stack of 8,000 termination of pregnancy reports represented the babies that died at the hands of the abortionist in a particular year. It started out more than that, closer to 10. And if you look at that piece of paper and you realize this is the only documentation that this child ever lived. So we started combing through these, and as a result we filed over 2,000 complaints. Now, a lot of them were reporting errors, which is still a violation of the law, but there are more egregious violations too. So the golden nuggets we found in these termination of pregnancy reports, as far as holding him accountable, they weren't golden nuggets because of the situation, but there were young girls in Gary and South Bend and Fort Wayne who were under the age of 14, and he was not reporting them to the Child Protective Services. I mean, if you do an abortion on a girl 12 years old, you know she's been sexually abused. Well, finally, finally, we were able to get the attention of the Medical Licensing Board, which is made up mostly of doctors. That's the disciplinary board for doctors in terms of their medical license. So I was in that hearing, and it started at 10 o'clock in the morning and finished at 2 o'clock the next morning. Well, Dr. Klopfer shares my German heritage, but he was an immigrant. He was born in Germany and immigrated to the United States, went through med school, and immediately started doing abortions. That was the first thing out of the hat. Well, just a little side note, I had many opportunities to talk to him face to face, and he said that the reason that he did abortions is because the Allies bombed Dresden, which was his hometown, and killed innocent people during the Second World War. So obviously a little bit of twisted thinking going on. But anyway, back to...
Some vengeance?
It certainly sounded like. I mean, if I had a lot of time, I could tell you the story about Ulrich Klopfer, and I think he came to a point of repentance just a week before he died. But anyway, that's another story for another time. Anyway, so this hearing went on, and I happened to be sitting behind the attorney for the Indiana State Department of Health. And it didn't look good, because doctors don't like to discipline doctors. So around, 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning, the questioning turned to these little girls that he'd done abortions on. And by this time, his German accent was heavier and heavier and heavier as the night wore on. So the doctors on the panel asked him about these alleged underage abortions, even though we had documentation. So he tried to convince these doctors that it was not his responsibility to report child sexual abuse to the Department of Child Services. That was a family issue, and he claimed it made him mad when families didn't follow up, but he didn't have a responsibility. Well, the doctors were kind of chit-chatting with him, through the thing. Yeah, absolutely. But before that, these doctors were kind of chit-chatting with him, and as doctors do, and all of us do, who have a commonality in profession or whatever. But when even the part where it came out that he was buying his medication from a veterinary supplier, they was just like, So the attorney from the Indiana State Department of Health turned around to me about midnight, and he said, "This isn't looking good. I don't think we're going to win." So then about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, the questioning turned to these underage abortions. And these doctors about fell out of their chair, because the one thing that they know for certain is not only are they mandatory reporters, but morally. You mean you're sending these little girls back into the same situation with no investigation of any kind? What would make you think that these atrocities that are being committed on this little girl are going to stop by just sending her back into it? Because, well, I don't need to explain to you all the reasons why the family may not do anything about it. Or maybe the person that brought her wasn't even her family, It could have been Uncle Joe posing as her dad or whatever to give consent. Anyway, so at 2 o'clock, and it's kind of interesting in these hearings because they debate. It's like being inside of a jury room, and they're debating, and they discuss it right in front of everybody so we could hear what they were saying. Well, ultimately, they didn't revoke his license, but they suspended his license. He was probably 75 at the time of this hearing. They suspended his license until he completed all this continuing education, and also practiced with an OBGYN. Oh, just one little thing to entertain us. Anyway, he had to practice with for so many, months with a a certified OBGYN to learn new OBGYN techniques. There was a whole list of things he had to do, which he was never going to do. So in December of 2013, he performed his last abortion in Fort Wayne because his license was suspended, and we also had some other legal action. It all came together at the same time. So we were able to close down all 3 of his abortion facilities in the state of Indiana by just being curious, finding out what tools we had available to us, and learning what the complaint process is. Now, there are organizations, and rightly so, that want to file criminal charges against these doctors. I don't argue with them at all, except a criminal case is a whole lot more complicated and expensive than filing a complaint. A complaint has a relatively low bar. For example, if you go into a nursing home to visit, I used to say grandma, but now I say great-grandma, and you see an attendant, staff of the nursing home, doing something that it looks to you as if it's abusive, you can file a complaint against the nursing home and the State Department of Health. That should prompt an investigation. And then the State Department, you don't need to know the patient's name, you don't need to know the staff member's name, you just bring it to the attention of the authorities. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to do anything about it. That's a whole nother thing. The pressure that you have to bring to bear for people to do their jobs is unbelievable. So that's why this complaint tool in our toolbox has been so effective. So let's see, I think I went through all this. Okay, you may have heard of the situation a couple of years ago, was in the fall. Abortionist Klopfer died. They found him sitting on the steps of his house, leaning against the wall with a smile on his face, dead. So about a week later, the family started going through, he was a hoarder. I mean, it was awful. His poor wife, that's another story too, but in his garage, I've got pictures of it but I won't show it to you unless you want to. I'll show it to you after. Floor to ceiling, boxes stuffed with little bags of aborted babies' bodies.
Oh my God.
They'd been there for 20 years. And I had some friends in the Attorney General's office in Indiana who did the investigation. And at first they thought, oh, he's tagged each one of these bags and we're going to be able to identify these babies. When they looked closer, he had assigned them pornographic names.
Oh my
Heartbreaking.
gosh.
I mean, I don't know if you've heard of Gosnell, and they're not outliers. They are not outliers. So the investigation went on, and the family got a call from one of these places where you can take cars and store them. You know, they have a fence around it, and he hadn't paid the rent, of course, because he was dead. So they called the family and said, "We've got this." He was fond of Mercedes, old Mercedes. We've got this Mercedes here that Ulrich Klopfer was paying rent on for us to store. Just wanted to let you know it was here. So they went over, opened the trunk. Babies' bodies stuffed in the trunk of this abandoned vehicle. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. It's so awful. So from that, in Indiana, we were able to pass a law that requires the abortion provider to dispose of the aborted babies' bodies as you would any other human body, either burial or cremation. And now we're having trouble enforcing it, but at least we got the law passed, and now those laws are being passed in other states. And you know what I get accused of? Okay, so you think abortion's okay as long as they bury the baby's bodies. No. Here's a strategy. This adds a whole other layer of expense to the abortion provider, and the mother, before she has the abortion, has to instruct the abortion provider if she wants her baby's body buried or cremated, or she wants to handle the internment or whatever, disposal. Disposal sounds bad. Remains. Yeah, if she wants to handle that herself. So right before that woman has her abortion, in Indiana it's 18 hours before, in other states it's 24, some 48, some nothing. The woman has to be given all this information. So then she sees this baby has a body. Never thought of that, and I've got to determine how my child's body will be handled. So no telling how many babies we've saved that way, but it's a never-ending fight. I'm still fighting to get the state to enforce this law. So anyway, altogether there were 2,411 bodies found in his garage and in his car. That's a whole nother story. As a matter of fact, there's been a documentary made about how we were able to close him down. It's called Inwood Drive because his abortion facility was on Inwood Drive in Fort Wayne.
Inwood?
Inwood Drive. Yeah, and I can, let's see, is there a way that I can, do we have your sign-up information? Do we have sign-up information? Okay, or does somebody have a piece of paper? We'll just pass her on. If you want me to send you the link, just put your email on there and I'll send you the link. Anyway, moving on from that, and yes, there's...
What term abortion? I mean...
Well, these were first trimester. Yeah. Now, you get into the pill abortions, and that's a whole other story, because what's happening there is the woman goes into the doctor, and he gives her the pill that cuts off the nutrition through the umbilical cord, and the baby dies, and then he gives her a pill to take 48 hours later at home that causes her to expel the baby's body. So her home becomes the abortion facility. I have heard horror stories that, like you wouldn't believe, of women who've gone through this. Have any of you seen the movie Unplanned?
Yes.
Yeah. That she had a pill abortion. So I've had women tell me they got in the shower and the baby came out in the shower and it clogged the shower drain. They had to dig the baby out of the shower drain. They put the babies in plastic bags and put them in the freezer. I mean, it's awful. They don't know what to do.
Pills out all the time.
Well, we're getting there. I'm not saying that in a good way.
No, I know.
Under the current administration, to get political for just a minute, that's what they're attempting to do. So anyway, what we're finding out is that when the woman goes to the abortionist to get the pills, she takes one in his presence, at least that's the way it's supposed to work, unless it's a mail order thing. And then she's given the second one, and the abortionist or their staff tells the woman, just flush. Now, I understand that if there's a miscarriage or something like that, and women don't know what to do, I get it. But intentionally telling someone to flush, if you want to call it human tissue, into the sewer system that pollutes the water, that's a violation of EPA regulations. So that's a whole nother place that we're going. As a matter of fact, we were able to keep a Planned Parenthood from opening in New York just a couple of months ago because their plans did not have the EPA accommodations, and so they were shut down before they opened. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any place where, I'm just curious, because there's so much talk about the sale of body parts, where they're telling them you can sell these, to such and such a place?
Yeah, IU Med School does research on aborted babies' body parts.
So they buy parts?
Yeah, from it's a university in Washington State. I think it's Washington or Oregon. I'm pretty sure it's Washington. That serves as a clearinghouse. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Center for Medical, CMP. Anyway, that David Daleiden did, the exposés. That's what that's all about.
On the internet, aren't they?
Yeah. So one of his videos shows a workshop at a abortion provider convention or whatever you want to call it. And the breakout session was about what to do with the babies' bodies. Now those are surgically aborted babies, and they don't know what to do with them, and it's just horrific. So we don't always catch them on abortion regulations, but the states that you would think that we don't have a chance to impact what's going on there, California, Illinois, New York, states like that, they don't care about abortion regulations, but they're abortion crazy. I mean, they're regulation crazy, to the point where they want to tell you, you have to use paper straws instead of plastic straws and all that stuff. Well, so this is a whole new frontier for us, because we don't have to look at abortion regulations. We can look at any regulation that applies to any business and hopefully hoist them on their own petard, so to speak. I kind of got off track here, but you don't care, do you?
No.
Okay, so I alluded to this before, but here's the reality that we're living in. We work hard to elect pro-life legislators at all levels. And we, through pregnancy resource centers, provide free and compassionate care, ultrasound. Well, you're probably familiar with pregnancy resource centers. Anything and everything to support that woman who is in a crisis, not only when she's pregnant, but beyond. Come alongside her and help her figure out how she's going to live her life now, because it is a life-changing event. But I've sat with many women who have had an abortion and wept with them. But I've not sat with any women who have been in a difficult situation and chose life that I sat with while they cried. Unless maybe they're teenagers. But that's a story for another day. Basically what's happening is abortion businesses remain largely unregulated, not because the regulations aren't there and the laws aren't there, but they're not being enforced. And I want to tell you a little bit more.
Does that include Planned Parenthood?
Yes. Yeah. They're in it for the money.
Right.
And if they can figure out a way, we had a Planned Parenthood in Indianapolis, this is going to gross you out, but was throwing aborted babies' bodies down a garbage disposal and flushing them into the sewer. It's awful. If people knew this. If this was happening to cats and dogs, I love cats and dogs, but still, it would be front page news.
You'd go to federal prison for that.
Yeah.
Well,
You
maybe.
beat your kid, but you don't beat your dog, which I don't
Oh,
want to beat anybody beating a dog.
I know. Well, yeah, it's not that we don't care about animals, but where's the outrage for humans?
Because they don't believe they're human.
Well, that's true.
It's not
It's a
going to
different
change
world
till,
philosophy.
the only way to change is through elections.
Well, and the Supreme Court decision that's going to be handed down this summer.
Do you have a sense on the Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, I was there in Washington on the steps of the Supreme Court when the arguments were held, and the optimism from our side. You could almost cut it with a knife. And so I just by the kindness of a friend of mine, I was invited to this big dinner they had that night. And person after person, these are legal minds that have been invested in pro-life work for decades, came to the podium and were jubilant because of the way the arguments went. And there's optimism that Roe is going to go down, and the Supreme Court will return the authority back to the states. And of course, then we'll have a state-by-state battle. But still,
The states are already preparing for that one way or the other.
one way or the other, you've got that exactly right. There's states that are way off the chart that are protecting and expanding abortion in their state if Roe is overturned. And then there are pro-life states that are passing legislation that says the day that the Supreme Court returns that authority to the states, abortion is illegal in that state. So, and then there are people...
You got California offering, come to our state, we'll help you out to have your
Yeah, the
abortion.
destination abortions, they call them. So anyway, I got off track. Did I answer your question? We don't know.
Abortions.
Yep.
Or homeless?
The other thing, too, is I don't know if you've heard any of the commentary about some of these very pro-abortion elected officials, governors, legislators, whatever, advocating that the mother has the right to kill the child after it's born. She has so much time to decide. So if the baby has, I don't know, has a cleft palate, they can just leave it there to die if the mother doesn't want it. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy
That's
where we are.
already been going on anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
that's
so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
woman's choice. It's my body, my choice.
Well, and it isn't her body and her
Unless it's
choice.
a vaccine,
Yeah, exactly.
really.
Exactly.
A vaccine that could very well use the stem cells from aborted babies to
Exactly.
develop.
I actually got a religious exemption from a federal job, which
Good
I
for
just
you.
recently quit. And they gave it to me.
Yeah.
Because of that argument.
Yep. Yeah. So anyway,
Where
that
I have a problem. A doctor like that aborted thousands of babies.
40,000 we
And
estimate.
an hour before he dies, he asks forgiveness, and God forgives him.
Well, there's an
Take
incredible.
that one up with God.
Well, there's an incredible story about this specific doctor. I'm glad to share with you, but it'll take me a little time to tell. But anyway, he could very well be sharing heaven with us. And I mean, God is a gracious and merciful God. You know, I think about Jonah.
And those
So,
babies will be in heaven.
yes, yes, absolutely. Now, there are some that might argue, but okay. Let's see. I lost my place here. Okay, I think we've covered that. Okay, so as a result of closing down the 3 Klopfer abortion horror businesses, we began to get the attention of people at the national level. How'd you do that? Well, you know, I'm no strategist. I just looked out my window and saw the women coming out, not having a wheelchair ramp, and one thing led to another. And I just, you know, and then a team came. This wasn't a one-man band. I mean, it was all the Lord in the first place, and then we had a team working on this because it became bigger than one person could do. And anyway, I didn't want to do it by myself. But anyway, I don't know why I went down that side trail. So, when we started thinking about how we did this, do any of you know David B. Wright? He was the founder of 40 Days for Life. I don't know if you're familiar with 40 Days for Life
What did you
campaign.
say his last name was?
B. Wright, David B. Wright. Anyway, he was the founder of the 40 Days for Life campaign, and I got to know him because we were working on another project. And he said, "How'd you do that?" And I said, "I don't know. I just looked out the window and thought these women are really being treated not right, and one thing led to another." So as I began to think about how did we do that, well, basically what we did is we collected the information, you know, public information requests. We had people telling us what was going on inside the abortion facility that had gotten an abortion. They're just, and when we ask the Lord to reveal stuff to us, it is amazing how you find out stuff. And then we look at it and we say, okay, so what do we have here? Do we have anything that's actionable? It may be atrocious, but unless it's breaking a law, we need to change the law because we can't hold them accountable to something that's not enforceable. So, and then we act. We do a lot of filing of complaints and that kind of thing. So that was really the beginning of this whole idea. And David said to me one day, he said, "You know, I think that maybe this is something other states should take a look at. Indiana is considered a pro-life state, but all these atrocities happened in Indiana at a licensed abortion facility that was inspected." I mean, well, I get.
Yeah.
Yeah, think. So anyway, I could tell you a whole lot more stories about the things he got away with before we started filing these complaints. But I'm glad to talk to anybody, you know, and give you more information. But I do want to get through this information, so I must go on here. Okay. So then we act, and then we always pray that the Lord would reveal the information we needed to know in order to take action. So, that is basically the simple plan. So David said, you know, I think you probably ought to think about taking this national. I said, well, I don't know. How am I going to do that? I'm 70 years old. I don't know how to do that. So we spent some time looking at other organizations and approaching them, asking them if they would include us in their national program. Well, there just didn't seem to be a fit. So 18 months later, after we'd tried, David said, well, let's just incorporate. And I said, David, I don't want to do that. Well, don't never tell the Lord what you don't want to do. So anyway, we did. In January of 2020, right before the COVID pandemic, which really put a crimp in our plans because, I mean, we didn't have any money, you know, we weren't going to be able to fundraise other than virtually, and that doesn't do it so swell, especially explaining a project like this. So anyway, every time I thought, Lord's closing the door, you know, can't hang on another minute because we just don't have the funding. Something would happen, and something would happen, and somebody would send us a check that would just keep us going for another month. Well, finally, now we're starting to build some momentum, and we're partnering with national organizations like Students for Life and Sidewalk Advocates for Life, and some of the other national organizations, because what they see that we have developed is an ability to take this simple strategy and look at each situation. I mean, people don't have time to look at their state laws and regulations and figure out, okay, what's going on here and what laws are being broken, and they're different from state to state, and what's the complaint process in this state and how to do it. And then once you file the complaint, you have to browbeat them to get them to do anything. So we already have that established.
You know all the state laws and
Yeah, the states where we're contacted about violations or some, and we'll get to that in a minute. I was CEO for a year, and I didn't want to do that. I just want to save babies. I don't want to do strategic planning and budgets and all that. So, my colleague that is now the CEO has developed an amazing team to go into where we have a violation reported. First, we need to determine if there's anything we can do about it. And so she has a team of researchers, and Loretta works with me in Indiana, and to dig into what the laws are, and then the public information requests that you need to submit in order to get the documentation, and then file the complaints and so on. And like I said, that's only half the battle, because then you got to be on them to make them respond to your complaint. So did that, you asked that question, did that answer the question? Yes. Yeah. So, okay, I think that I covered that. All right. You guys are so kind to extend grace to me for wander all over the place. So now I'm going to tell you a few stories. We have time, don't we? Is this over?
it's over at
We have half hour? Okay. So we were able to close down an abortionist in Florida. We started this whole thing in January 2020, and this occurred in September of last year when he went out of business. This is one of our first wins as an organization. So what happened, I'll try to be as delicate as I can explaining what happened, but so there, as you're probably aware, there are people outside the abortion facility that reach out to women before they go in and try to help them understand their other options, and there are people to help her. So one faithful woman stood in front of an abortion facility in Port Charlotte, Florida. The abortionist's his last name was Azima. And they'd just seen things that didn't look right. When they'd see the abortionist show up, he was obviously physically impaired. He kind of shuffled down the sidewalk and his hands would shake. And I think he was 85. And so there were just some things, that just didn't look right to them. But on this specific day, a young woman approached the abortion facility. She was going to go in and get an abortion. And the woman that I'm referring to had a conversation with her, trying to help her understand she didn't need to do this. But the woman went in anyway. And as the events unfolded, not too long after she went in, she came running out of the abortion facility because she'd gotten up off the procedure table, and of course she was unclothed from the waist down. And blood was literally running down her legs. And she was screaming, "Somebody help me, I can't breathe." So, of course, our people were there to help her and get her medical attention. As the story unfolded, she'd gone in to get her abortion, and she was on the procedure table, and she either had a reaction to the anesthetic or a panic attack or both, and she couldn't breathe. And she started screaming, "Call 911, I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And the abortionist said, "Too bad, you're here now, I'm doing this." So she eventually jumped off the procedure table and ran out of the building, and there she was. So as we began investigating this, we found out that this 85-year-old abortionist was operating an abortion facility without a license in Florida, and had been for years. He had had multiple med-mal cases filed against him. He had been convicted of Medicaid fraud in relationship to charging Medicaid for work that he did, that he didn't, and all kinds of things. Now, this was in Florida. Who's the governor of Florida?
DeSantis.
And who do you think of when you think of one of the most pro-life governors in the state? DeSantis. It took us months to get the attention of the agencies that are under his direction. And we attempted to get to him as best we could. These governors have a circle of people around them that is very difficult to get through. And these people are there, I guess, to protect the governor from any kind of situation that might embarrass him or whatever. So, well, it's going to embarrass him when we find out that this abortionist is operating there in Florida. So anyway, through an interesting series of events, we were actually able to get someone with a face-to-face conversation with the governor, and boy, did we get action. So what happened is the first thing that was reported to us was one of the agencies let us know that they were going to act on our complaint and start an investigation. Well, part of that is if there's a complaint been filed against a provider, the provider is notified. So within days after we found out that there was an investigation, he retired, shut his doors for good. Now, you may say that's coincidence, or in my opinion,
That doesn't sound like coincidence. That's
when
you guys forced him out.
when he found out that he was under investigation, and he had been through all these legal proceedings before, at 85, he decided that, well, maybe it was time to just quit. So that was the Florida abortionist. And this is going on all across the country. We just need to get the information so we can do something about it. So in Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, there was an independent abortionist that was operating, and we had someone on the sidewalk, and a woman approached, and she thought that in her discussion, the sidewalk advocate concluded that she was going in for a pill abortion, she thought. Woman goes in, comes out a bit later, carrying a bag, and well, yeah, that's probably the second pill in the bag. So our person approached her and attempted to tell her about abortion pill reversal and some other things that she could do and how we were there for her no matter what. And the woman, her medical condition, just by looking at her, was deteriorating almost every step she took. And so our person walked with her to the car, and by the time she got to the car, she was slumped over the steering wheel and couldn't even talk. So our person went into the abortion facility and said, the patient that just left your building is in extreme physical distress. There's no way she can drive home. Would you come and help her? They said, she's not our patient. Talk about patient abandonment. So we were able to get her the help she needed, and we filed a complaint for patient abandonment against this abortionist. Can you believe that? Can you believe that?
Babies, why would he care about the mother?
What kind of abortion? Was it a pill abortion?
No, what actually happened is she'd had a surgical abortion, and no, she had a pill abortion, and it wasn't complete. So she went back in for a surgical abortion, and what she had in the bag was an antibiotic. And she had dropped a prescription on the ground, and that's how the person picked it up and handed it to her and noticed that it was an antibiotic. So then
Did they
as...
call an ambulance?
Yeah, they called an ambulance, took her to the hospital, and see, this is what happens. God bless the woman that was there for being there to help, but she didn't find out any information about the woman. She didn't find out what hospital she took her to. Nothing. So our complaint is much weaker because it was an observation, you know, and obviously firsthand with the abortion provider saying, she's not our patient. But so we are developing training now under reprotection to help people if they're there for 40 days or they go there to be an advocate or whatever. If you see something like this, here's what you need to do. You know, my worst calls are the people that call me and say, I saw an ambulance leaving the abortion facility. When? Last week. Did you get pictures? No. Did you notice which way the ambulance turned? No. I mean, you can't do anything with that. So anyway, that's the Georgia abortionist. In Ohio, you may have heard about this in the news. Some pro-life people, I don't want to know how they found out, but found a second trimester aborted baby in the dumpster behind the abortionist. So that's egregious. Yes, I mean, awful. But, and they were able to have a funeral. All of that's good, except nobody filed a complaint against the abortionist for throwing the baby in the dumpster. I mean, there's lots of violations there.
Isn't it illegal to go through someone's dumpster, though? So they could have...
I don't know how they found it, but they did. Okay.
Was a complaint filed about that one then?
We're working on it because we didn't know about it until we saw it in the pro-life news. And there are a lot of organizations that expose bad behavior, and that's great. And we all want to be, we all need to be horrified by what's going on. But if that's all you do is just blast it out, and you don't go through the grunge work of finding out what violation occurred and how to bring it to the attention of the authorities and all of that, we've just been...
Did they have documentation? Did they have pictures or... maybe, or
yeah.
from the dumpster?
Yeah.
Those states that allow, second trimester abortions, what is legal, the legal disposal?
Well, it depends state to state. Indiana, Ohio, and a growing number of states have passed the respectful disposal of aborted babies' bodies, like I talked about in Indiana, as a result of the Klopper atrocities. But I want to tell you another story about an issue that was going on that had to do with fetal disposal. Disposal of aborted babies' bodies. So there's a big Planned Parenthood in St. Louis. And if I had the time, I'd tell you how we found out. But it's another one of those God things where he brought it all the way around and brought us everything we needed, including the documentation from the medical waste haulers and that kind of thing. So the Planned Parenthood in Missouri was sending through a medical waste transporter the bodies of babies aborted there to a waste disposal plant in Indianapolis. And I had the sheet. I mean, it's terrible. I had the sheet listing the babies, and 24, 26 weeks. It was terrible. And I'll try not to make you really sick, but these babies then would be dropped off at this medical disposal plant. That's what they do. And they're certified in the state of Indiana to handle medical waste. Well, the drums that they came in were so big and heavy that the workers couldn't lift them up. This is awful, but this happened. So they had these like forklifts or something that would pick up the drums and raise them up and dump the babies' bodies in their big auger. Grind them up,
So just a bigger garbage disposal.
send them to the landfill. So we were able to put a stop to that, again, through the same legislation way. I hope we have. But we have to be ever vigilant, because just because you have a win doesn't mean you really have a win. So this, I couldn't believe it. If I hadn't been supplied the list of the babies' bodies and more than one transport, I mean, they were just doing this. The medical waste supplier or disposer in Indianapolis was fined. They got thousands of dollars in fines because their certification letter for operating specifically said they could not dispose of aborted babies' bodies. And here they were doing it. So anyway, I could tell you story after story after story that would literally curl your hair. And we need to be horrified. And we're working on some investigations right now that are really, really bad. We need to be horrified, but that's not enough. We need to do something about it. I don't know how many of you know Father Frank Pavone. So I met him, I don't know, years ago, and when we started putting this plan together, he encouraged us, and he said, it's impossible to practice vice virtuously. He said, what's more of a vice than killing innocent little boys and girls? So he went on to say, everything we need to close down these abortion businesses is right there behind their doors. We just need to find out what it is and hold them accountable. Okay, so, got 20 minutes left. So anyway, and then I had a slide under my edited ones that the last one was, our battle is not against flesh and blood, that passage from Ephesians. So as much as we are just horrified by the behavior of the abortionists and the people that work for them and the medical waste haulers and all of these people, that's not really our enemy. They're being used as pawns by Satan. So it's really hard sometimes not to get really angry at them and, pray some prayers that probably aren't real good. But I just ask the Lord to give me a heart of mercy towards those people, because they're a sinner just like me. And while we think their sin is way off the chart, it's right there with the sins that I commit. So,
See what an impact God's grace has done on some of the abortionists
that have left the
how
business.
They have just been leaders in the pro-life movement.
Yeah, well, Bernard Nathanson for one. So anyway, what I'd like to ask of you is if you would please pray for us. And as we come to your mind, just pray that the Lord would continue to show us stuff that we need to know in order to put these people out of business. We don't want to make abortion safer or cleaner or anything like that. So that's not our goal. We want to make it so that they have to pay big fines or they're going to be investigated or something so that they are ultimately closed down. And it takes a while. It's, this is why it's hard to get people with a lot of money that typically donate to pro-life organizations to donate to us, because they want to see, if I give you money, how many abortion facilities are you going to shut down in 6 months? Well, these take, Klopfer took years. So anyway, pray for us. We have a website. It's really complicated, reprotection.org. So go there and find out what we're about. And I will give you my card. Please contact me if you want to talk further, or however I can help you be part of the team. If you go to an abortion facility with 40 Days for Life or something, please just, if you see something, say something. And we have a number you can call, you can email us, whatever, and we'll respond. Because like this lady in Florida, she knew that there was something obviously wrong, but she didn't have any idea what the rules were and the laws in Florida. She didn't know how the complaint process or who to complain to and how to stay with it so that the complaint would be addressed. That's what the unique thing that we bring to the pro-life community is. Let us know what you see. And who knows how many abortion facilities will shut down together because everybody's working together and giving us the information. The other thing, if you're interested, I think Loretta mentioned this, but we're developing a training program. We don't have an exact name for it yet, but it'll be something clever, I'm sure, because the younger people name these things. But it will. You can get online and get the training and find out the ways and the things to notice and how to act on it very quickly. And if the Lord pushes you, not pushes you, asks you to make a donation, there's a place on the website to do that. I'm not here to ask for money, but this is difficult work to get people to support. It's not. We're all in this together. The pregnancy resource centers can show you this little baby is the baby that is alive because of your donation to our organization, and that's great. I mean, I'm not taking away from them, but what we do is not quite as visual. I like to think it's still needed, and the Lord had many of opportunities to shut us down, and since He didn't, by gum, I'm staying with it. So just be engaged and share the information. Who knows? Pregnancy resource centers, if any of you know anybody that works there or volunteers there, oftentimes our best leads come from women who have had abortions and go to pregnancy resource centers for post-abortion counseling and healing, and they tell atrocious stories. And if we can get that information, I mean, we don't want to interfere with the work of the pregnancy resource centers. The first, the most important thing is to provide help to the woman. But if she shares something with you, and she can stay anonymous, we just need to know it because it might add with something else, another piece of information, and ultimately we're able to hold these bad actors accountable. So all of that was on the slide I edited and put in this morning, and I'm really proud of myself for remembering it. So thank you for putting up with the technology snafus and my bumbling around and all of that. My motto is get up, dress up, and show up, and you never know what God's going to do with you. So don't think that you're just one person, what can you do? I mean, that was where I was. I had no idea how the Lord was going to lead this. And I'll just say this in closing. Back when I started, before the Pregnancy Resource Center in Fort Wayne, I found out about a young woman who was going to Cincinnati to have a second trimester abortion. And a couple of us who had been vocal about the life issue and educating and reaching out to people. Well, we didn't have a pregnancy resource center, so we talked with her the night before. We found a woman that had had a second trimester abortion, and she explained to her what she was going to go through. And anyway, we offered her everything that we could think of: a place to stay, medical treatment, a way to continue her education, all of that. So her aunt was our connector, because that was before cell phones, believe it or not. So she went along with her, and she couldn't call back on her cell phone, so whenever she had an opportunity, she'd call us back and give us a progress report. Well, at one point, the girl didn't have enough money. And I was like, yes, this is what's going to stop her. Her father wired her the money. Well, she didn't know it was a 2-day procedure. She didn't have a hotel room, didn't have money for it. Yes, this is what the Lord's going to use. The abortion provider got a hotel room for her. And it was one thing like that after another. Eventually, she had the second trimester abortion. I was heartbroken. We had people praying for this girl all over the place. And I remember saying to the Lord, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. If this is the way you're going to treat us after everything that we've done, and you could have stopped this and you didn't, I'm just not sure I want to do this. Well, I didn't hear an audible voice or anything like that, but the thought that came to my mind is, you don't have to take the blame for any, or responsibility for anything that you perceive to be a failure, but don't you dare take the credit for anything I do through you. So I share that story because I want you to leave here knowing, it's important to me, knowing that anything I've shared with you is not because I'm smart, not because I have all these creative ideas, but because of the Lord. He's done all of this. And if I don't make that clear to you, I'm sure that when I walk out the door, it'll strike me with a bolt of lightning. So that has worked very well, because there have been a lot of disappointments, and just knowing that, okay, the Lord doesn't hold me responsible for that. And so I try my best to keep my end of the deal, and that's, I won't take any of the glory. So, any questions? I know I've given you a lot of information. Let's see, where are those cards? Oh, here they are.
Here's the contact list.
The what?
The contact list that you wanted to people.
Oh, okay. Did it get around to everybody?
I think so.
Okay. I'll just go ahead and send you that,
Is there any way it can be texted?
oh, sure.
Hardly ever look at my emails.
I know.
Put my
I
phone
think I
number
have
on
just
there.
enough cards. If anybody's
Yes,
together.
We're together.
You're together? Okay.
I'll just take one.
All right.
Oh, you want one?
Okay. It's just information about us, and it has the contact information. This is a picture. You can barely see it, but this is where this abortionist Klopfer started. He moved into the office next to mine, but this building was awful. I mean, I got to tour it. I saw it with my own eyes after he moved to the other building, because the building was for sale. Oh my gosh. You wouldn't want to treat a dog in that building. It was terrible. So any other questions? Please, if you feel the Lord's nudging you to be a part of this, we would love to have you. We would love to have you. Did Loretta leave?
What is your, besides finances, what is your biggest need from volunteers?
Well, to be eyes and ears. If you happen to be in a community that has a freestanding abortion facility, if that's not what you do, or something that you do, I would encourage you to visit our website and see if when the training is announced, because it's interesting
What
information.
the training's for?
It is for what things to look for.
Okay.
And if you're having a conversation with somebody and they share some atrocious story with you, send it our
It's
way.
all about the follow-up.
Yeah, and there are certain skill sets that we could really use. One of the people that came to us her job was medical research, so that was really helpful, because she knew how to look into some of these medical regulations and whatnot. About any skill you have, we can find a place. And if you email that info at reprotection, I think it is, .org, and just say you're interested in being a part of what we do, we'll find a place for you. Somebody will get back with you, and yes.
So I know, and I heard you mention this once.
Excuse me, I just one other thought that came, because a lot of this stuff you can do remotely from your own computer. Yes.
So I heard you mention this once about a certain situation, but one of the things that I've known women that go through needing, quote, an abortion is because there's no place for them to go or no place for them to stay. And so I heard you saying that you were going to offer this woman help with her education and so forth and so
Yeah.
on. So are there people that are opening up their homes?
Well, back in the day, this was in 86 or 87, there weren't so many of those places available. However, there's a growing number now of places that women can go at no cost and stay during the duration of their pregnancy, and typically beyond, for up to a year as they get their lives together. You know, this. There's a place in Fort Wayne that's called a Mother's Hope, and the requirements to be a resident there are that the woman has to be pregnant and homeless. So, and they're filled to capacity. But there are places like that around. Now, back in the day, we used to have what we called shepherding homes, and people that were willing to open their homes. The problem with that is that a lot of these girls were minors, and it can be problematic to bring a stranger into your home that you want to help. And if she's a minor, if the parents don't give, you had to get parental permission and all that. So I think some of that is still going on, maybe not in an organized way like it was, but these homes are, there's one in Terre Haute, Indiana, there's one in South Bend. So that's just Indiana. If you find someone that has a need like that, and you check on the internet, there are places like this all over the place that would be glad to come alongside women.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of things anybody can do also. Just write your congressmen, senators, governors, whether they're pro-life or not. I mean,
I've had
you can do
letters.
that in every community. You can go to the pro-life marches.
Absolutely.
The prayer days, the March on Washington.
Yep.
I mean, there's all kinds of stuff.
Right, specifically to this issue, but yeah, you're right. And I'm in the middle of a fight in the legislature in Indiana right now, and our friends tell us that just a handful of letters make a huge difference. Letters, phone calls, emails, whatever, because
Phone calls are so quick and easy.
yeah, and you don't talk to the legislator anyway, but you would be amazed at how many people are afraid to pick up the phone and call their legislator. That's intimidating. Well, in the first place, they work for us, and in the second place, you probably won't talk to the legislator. If it's an issue, they just record what the issue was and if you're in favor or not, and you get enough of those phone calls, and they realize that, hey, I better pay attention to this, especially if you're in their district. So, yes, ma'am.
He said to get up, dress up, and
Show up.
show up.
Yeah.
That was me.
I wish it were original. So,
Then give God glory.
yes, all the glory goes to God. Absolutely. For me personally, I don't want to get crossways with God because I promised Him. Anybody else?
You're an amazing lady. Thank you for what you do.
Well, to God be the glory, because I'm just a little.
But you cared enough to get the ball rolling.
Well, somebody said that to me before, and this is a way I look at it. The Lord reached into His toolbox and got a hammer, and everything I see is a nail. So it works out real well.
I love that.
Yes.
Are you able to, the other thing that I was saying about this Dr. Klopper,
Mhm.
is that his name?
Clapper. Mhm.
Was the underage, 13 and 14-year-olds. So are you finding a lot of that, or incest, or is that being researched?
More and more. And it's really hard to nail this down. There's a situation in Indiana where, long story, but there was information being redacted from the termination of pregnancy report. And so we went to the legislators and they passed it, because you have to have legislation to tell the Indiana State Department of Health what to do, or they won't do it on their own. So the legislation passed, they changed the form, and they're still redacting it. Well, what's behind that redaction bar is the state from which these girls are coming. So if they come, and we, anecdotally, we know this is happening. Underage girls are coming from Kentucky to Indiana and getting abortions. And so then what? There's a reporting law in Indiana, and there's a reporting law in Kentucky. So if she's from Kentucky, does the Indiana abortionist report to the Indiana authorities? Or, and if so, do the Indiana authorities then connect with the Kentucky authorities? Because something simple like that, you would think you wouldn't have to, be a no-brainer. But no, that you can't take anything for granted. So
So are they just not reporting then?
Well, but also aren't the schools getting more and more involved in not telling the parents and
yeah,
making them transport?
in every state where there's any kind of parental consent, there has to be connected with it what's called a judicial bypass. And what that means is the girl can go to a judge and say, my mom's going to beat me if she knows I have an abortion, so I need to have this abortion without her consent. And there's some judges that are in the pockets of the abortion providers, and they just rubber stamp. So one thing that we were trying to do is, and the parents never know about this hearing. It's all done, and then when the girl starts having complications or whatever, who do you think's responsible? It would be the parents, not the abortionist. So what we tried to do is pass a law that would require the judge, if he decides, well, it's incumbent upon him to do this unless he decides it's going to be dangerous for the girl, to at least notify the parents that there's going to be a hearing. That's all. Well, that's being fought all the way up to the Supreme Court. You thought we'd asked for the keys to Fort Knox.
But here's another loop in that part of it.
Well, see,
We have such a huge problem with sex trafficking in our area.
Yeah.
Because we're the biggest city between Salt Lake City and Denver.
yep,
And they come through, it is unreal.
right.
Couldn't a lot of that be stopped?
How?
These girls are going to these judges and they're getting
Well-
abortions, but even the people
It-
that have these kids and they're in their control and these girls get pregnant, who's doing those abortions?
Planned Parenthood. And we have undercover, I don't know if you're familiar with Lila Rose of Live Action. She's the one that did the undercover videos, quite a bit of.
Started off as a teenager.
Yeah. So anyway, she came to several states, including Indiana. And I don't think it was Lila herself, but somebody that was affiliated with her and had been trained by her went into a Planned Parenthood facility and acted as if they were sex traffickers, pimps, whatever you want to call them. And on video, the Planned Parenthood employee said, I don't want to know anything about that.
Don't tell them how old you are, or how
No,
old your,
no, no.
your person that you've been
And
with is.
even on the video, the person that's taken the video says, well, just what can this girl do and how soon after the abortion? And they were telling him. I mean, that video's out in the public.
They do it with sex selection abortions. I think she has some videos about that too.
Yeah.
What?
Sex selection. So I'm having a girl and I want to have a boy, so I just want to get rid of it. And that's illegal to have an abortion for that reason.
Well, depending on typically where it is in the pregnancy. But by the time you find out if it's a boy or girl,
It's your second.
So they had people pretend that they were wanting
thank you for
sex.
coming. I appreciate it.
Very good.
Thank you. Do you want one of my cards?
I got one.
I've got a business card if you want. I mean, I want to make sure that I hand out everything. I don't want to take it back to Indiana with me. And I've got more of these if anybody else wants my card.
Thank you. Need to pass them out for you.
Yeah, and I think there's some more in that bag or somewhere.
Does Lutherans for Life work with you at all?
I'm a member of the Fort Wayne Lutherans for Life. They're more of an educational arm, I think, but they're very supportive. I really appreciate that group.
You probably knew Steve King, the congressman from Iowa.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
He's a friend of ours that was very pro-life.
Yep.
Very active and legislative.
Yeah, we need heroes like that.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, Jim Banks is my congressman, and he's amazingly pro-life and does everything that he can to advocate. You may recognize, I don't know if you've followed any of the January 6th hearings and all of that. He and Jim Jordan were the two that were supposed to be on that investigative committee, and they got kicked off
That
because,
Nancy didn't like.
yeah.
That was